state that is dominated by a racist, expansionist philosophy. Why? Because it defines itself as the Jewish state. By defining itself as a Jewish state, it actually succumbs to an exceptionalist view that prefers its Jewish citizens on all others. It means that Palestinian citizens in Israel, because most Palestinians are not even citizens, they are actually prisoners, but the Palestinian prisoners in Israel, they are kind of 6, 7, or 8 rate citizens. They had before them the Jewish Ashkenazi elite, and then the Sephardi elite, and then the ordinary Sephardi, and then the ordinary Ashkenazi, and then the Arab Jews, who are actually the majority of Jews in Israel, who are far below, and then Ethiopian Jews that are black and are not even entitled to donate blood, and somewhere down the line you find the Palestinians. In order to deal with this issue, Israel must become a state of its citizens. There was a Palestinian parliament member, Knesset member, who said this is what we have to do. He had to run for his life. His name was Azmi Bashara. What he offered, he suggested that Israel becomes a state of its citizen, like in America. If I decide to immigrate to America and I become a citizen, in terms of right, we would be equal. We support it all over the world. Why don't we support it in the Jewish state? Why? Because our politicians are subject to pressure of Jewish lobbies. Why they're subject to such a pressure? Because the Jewish lobby in America, in Britain, in France, in Canada, realized 2-3 decades ago that a Western politician is much cheaper than a tank. And this is devastating. However, all we have to do in Palestine in order to save the situation is to turn it into a state of its citizen. Only Benjamin Netanyahu or any other Israeli prime minister should do is to stand up and to say, we are very sorry. We understand what happened here in this region for the first time. We ethnically cleansed so many Palestinians. We have now 7 million Palestinian refugees around the world. Hello, my brothers, my Palestinian brothers. Please come home. Let's live together. This would be the true embodiment of the Zionist dream. The Jews can manage to come back to their land and even to live in peace. It won't just resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It would resolve 2,000 years of Jewish agony, of skirmishes with their neighbors. This is very simple. Can the Jews in Israel lead to such a reconciliation? Maybe, but they have to be de-Zionized first. They have to be de-Judaized, not to leave the Jewish religion, not to stop being Jews, but to detach themselves, to drift away from the Jewish supremacist ideas that are based on chosenness, to stop being chosen. To stop being chosen is to become human.
Well, you know, we've talked so much about the distortions, whether it's on the two-state solution, whether it's AIPAC, but I wonder on your tour is called the Grassroots Tour, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. What have you seen, what has been the breadth, the depth of the support you've seen for the Palestinian cause in America? I mean, is the AIPAC consensus something that, you know, you're seeing all people for, or have you seen people come out and really been for the Palestinian people?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is no doubt that all over in the West, there is massive support for the Palestinian people. In counter proportions to what we see within politics, because while our politics in the West is dominated by different Jewish lobbies, here it's AIPAC, in Britain 80% of the Tory parliament, the leading party MPs, parliament members, 80% are friends of conservative friends of Israel. They all care about Israel. How many of them care about Liverpool, about Rochester, about Hartlepool? And the people in Liverpool and Rochester understand that something isn't going wrong. But I tell you something else. I tell my audience that with 50 million Americans in deep poverty, and I had some statistics that suggest that 40% of the Americans are about to flip, that they are dependent on the next paycheck. We are all Palestinians. We are all, I'm here for 3 weeks in this country. I'm going around and I don't see the poor people of America. Why? Because this society is now heavily segregated.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing I want to get your response to is one thing we've seen here in America quite a bit, especially in the Republican Party presidential debates, is this idea that the Palestinians are an invented people, a made-up people, and that they have no rights because they do not exist. I wonder how you respond to that.
It is almost funny because the only research into invention of people, that we are aware of is actually a book that was a bestseller in Israel by an Israeli professor called Shlomo Zand, and it is called The Invention of the Jewish People. Now, people are invented. People are invented. The Jewish people were invented as people 110 years ago. And this is well documented. The problem with people who invent themselves start when they start to celebrate their national or patriotic symptoms on the expense of others. And this is exactly what we see in Palestine. Now, there is no doubt that Palestinian culture has been there since time began. But even if Palestinians started to understand or to internalize their national existence as the outcome of the Zionist movement by means of negation. So what? So the day the first Jewish immigrant arrived in Palestine with a Zionist ideology, this was the birth of the Palestinian identity, even if the Zion is correct here, if Newt Greenwich is correct. So it means that the Palestinian nation, according to this philosophy, is exactly as old as the Zionist movement. So it's a completely idiotic argument.
With just a few minutes left, one thing I want to get really your thoughts on very quickly is, in your writings you also use the term apartheid as to describe the Israeli policies. And I think that that's something that people in America often don't understand. Can you say why you think that's an apt term?
Yeah, I think that it's a very important term because people in America understand what apartheid is an organized system of discrimination. Actually, I argue that it's not apartheid. I argue that it's far worse. Because while apartheid is a system of exploitation of the indigenous, what we see in Israel is an attempt to get rid of the Palestinians as people. The Israelis dream to wake up in the morning and to find out that they just left. To a certain extent, yeah? This aspect of Israeli political thinking is very similar to the Nazi Lebensraum, living space. That was not a system of exploitation, it was a system that was indulged in racially motivated, expansionist, nationalist philosophy. This is what we see in Israel. The settlement, the racist, expansionist philosophy. It's Lebensraum, living space. This is very, very frightening.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us once again, Mr.
Pleasure,
Gilad Atzmon.
And
the new book is The Wandering Who, 0 books. You can get it on Amazon,
yeah,
sure. All over the place. Thank you again for joining us, and good luck on the rest of your tour.
Thank you so much.
Again, I'm Eugene Puryear. Thank you so much for joining us here on Special Interviews.